Trust is a funny thing. It's not something you think about every day. It's not something you measure or check on. It's just there, like the air you breathe, like the walls of your home. You assume it'll hold. You assume it won't break. And then one day, without warning, you realize it was never as solid as you thought. It was a Tuesday, a regular, uneventful Tuesday, the kind that drags by without giving you much to remember. Work had been the usual mess of meetings and emails, nothing special. But something about the day made me restless. I don't know what it was. Maybe the way the sky looked before a storm. Maybe just an itch in my gut. I came home early. Not for any particular reason. Just one of those decisions you make without thinking. A whim. A moment of instinct. And that single, stupid decision ended up changing everything. I pulled into the driveway, noticing right away that my wife's car was parked where it always was. Nothing unusual about that. I grabbed my briefcase, locked the car, and stepped up to the front door. When I pushed it open, the house felt different. It was quiet, but not the usual kind of quiet. There was a hum of music coming from the living room, low and slow, a song I couldn't name but recognized from the way it curled in the air. It was the kind of music you don't play for no reason. The kind that fills spaces between whispered words and stolen glances. I stood there for a second, my heartbeat picking up just slightly. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Nothing was wrong. Why would it be? I stepped inside, letting the door close behind me. The air smelled different, like perfume, but stronger than usual, fresh, recent, like it hadn't had time to settle. I walked forward, my steps quiet against the hardwood floor. And then I saw them. At first, my brain didn't register what I was looking at. Maybe because it didn't make sense. Maybe because my mind refused to connect the dots. But my eyes saw everything. My wife, standing too close to him. A kid, a damn kid. Couldn't have been older than his early 20s, maybe younger. Her fingers were in his hair. Their mouths were pressed together, slow and deep, like they had all the time in the world. I stopped breathing. For a second, everything went silent in my head. The music, the blood rushing in my ears, the sound of my own breath. It all cut out like someone had flipped a switch. Then the heat kicked in. A burn started in my chest and spread outward, down my arms, curling into my fists. My stomach twisted. My jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth might crack. I didn't think, didn't stop to process. The words came out before I could even decide to speak. Melissa. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a scream. Just a single word, flat and sharp. She froze. The kid jumped back like he'd been electrocuted, his eyes wide, his mouth still wet from kissing my wife. His hands hovered in the air, unsure whether to reach for her or shove them in his pockets. My wife turned slowly, her face pale, eyes blown wide with shock. Like she never expected to get caught. Like she thought she was safe. Safe for me. I felt something crack deep inside my chest, but I didn't let it show. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to lie, maybe to beg. I didn't care. I took a step forward, and she took one back, her hands lifting like she thought I was going to do something. Like I was the threat here. Like I was the one who had something to answer for. I wasn't a violent man. Never had been. But in that moment, I could have torn the whole damn house apart with my bare hands. She started talking, her voice thin, breaking. It's not what it looks like. I let out a short, harsh laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Not what it looks like. I saw it. I watched her kiss him. What else could it be? The kid, whoever the hell he was, looked like he wanted to vanish in a thin air. I could see his brain working, trying to figure out if he should stay and defend her, or if he should run. If he had any sense at all, he'd run. Because right now, all I could see was red. Melissa took another step back, her hands still raised. Her lips parted like she was searching for the right words. I didn't want to hear them. There was nothing she could say that would undo what I'd just seen. Nothing to make it right. Nothing to stop what was coming next. And whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. Melissa's mouth moved, but I didn't hear a damn word. It was all noise, empty, meaningless noise. Excuses, explanations, whatever pathetic attempt she was about to make to twist this into something less than what it was. But I saw it. I watched it. There was no talking her way out of this. No clever little lie that would erase what had just happened. The kid, because that's what he was, a damn kid, had already stepped back, like he was hoping to melt into the walls, eyes flicking between me and Melissa like a trapped animal trying to find an exit. He should have run the second I walked in. Hell, he never should have been here in the first place. But he just stood there, his face pale, his body stiff, like he hadn't fully processed the situation yet. Melissa was quicker. She always had been. She knew how to talk her way out of things, how to manipulate a situation so that she never looked like the bad guy. Listen, she started, her voice shaky but controlled. It's not. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. It wasn't what it looked like. I could still see it. The way her fingers had curled in his hair. The way their lips had pressed together. The way her body had angled into his, like they fit together, like it was natural. It had been real. It had been comfortable. It had been happening long before I walked in. I clenched my jaw, shaking my head, breathing hard through my nose to keep from doing something I'd regret. My voice came out low, rough. So, tell me, Melissa, what exactly was it then? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. I took another step forward, and she took one back. The kid, still standing there like an idiot, lifted his hands slightly, like he was ready to jump in if something happened. Like he thought he was the one who needed to protect her. That made me laugh again. This boy, this stupid, arrogant, clueless boy, had no idea what he'd just walked into. He didn't know what it meant to stand where I stood, to look at the woman you build a life with and realize she wasn't yours anymore. Maybe she never was. Melissa's voice broke the silence again, rushed this time. He's one of my students. I didn't flinch, didn't react. But inside, something cracked apart even further. Her student. Of course. Melissa was a professor, had been for years. She taught literature, talked about stories and poetry like they were the most important things in the world. She'd always loved her job, loved the way young minds soaked up everything she had to say. I bet she really loved it. The kid looked down at the floor, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Good. He should want to disappear. Because if he thought I was about to give him some kind of easy way out, if he thought I was going to throw a punch and then walk away like some dumb, angry husband in a movie, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I wasn't going to hit him. That would be too easy. That would give him a reason to play the victim. And I wasn't giving him, or Melissa, that luxury. I turned my eyes back to her. Your student, I repeated slowly. She nodded quickly, desperate now. Yes, it's not. I cut her off. How long? She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I exhaled hard, forcing myself to stay still, forcing my fist to stay at my sides instead of driving one through the nearest wall. How long had you been lying to me? How long had she been sneaking around? How long had she been looking me in the eye, kissing me goodbye in the mornings, knowing damn well she was coming back here and doing the same thing to him? She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then, because she couldn't help herself, because she had always been the kind of person who needed to be in control of a situation, she stepped toward me. Please, she said, her voice softer now, more careful. I know this looks bad, but it's not what you think. I turned my head slowly, my body stiff. Not what I think. She nodded quickly, her hands lifting slightly. He's been struggling in class. We've been meeting outside of office hours to go over. I let out another harsh laugh. Right? I said, dragging the word out. That's what this is? Just a little extra credit? Is that what you're calling it now? The kid finally spoke, his voice weak. Sir, I didn't mean. I snapped my head toward him so fast he shut his mouth. I could see the panic in his eyes. He was regretting every choice that had led him to this moment. He should have regretted it sooner. Melissa reached for my arm, but I jerked away before she could touch me. I didn't want her hands on me. Not after they had been on him. I can explain. No, I said, my voice flat. You can't, because there was no explanation. Nothing she could say that would make this okay. The only thing left to do now was decide what happened next. And I already knew one thing for damn sure. Melissa wasn't getting out of this unscathed. She was about to find out exactly what it felt like to lose everything. Melissa looked at me like she still had a chance. Like there was some path forward where she could talk her way out of this, smooth over the cracks, make me see things her way. She was wrong. She had already lost. The kid, because that's all he was, a kid, was still frozen in place. He was watching us like he was waiting for a cue, some kind of signal that told him what his next move should be. His eyes kept flicking toward Melissa like she was going to save him. I almost laughed. Melissa couldn't even save herself. She took a breath, trying to steady herself, then forced her voice to be gentle. Listen. No. That single word cut through the room like a blade. Her mouth snapped shut, her lips pressing together. She wasn't used to that. Not for me. I'd always been the one to listen, to be patient, to let her have the last word. Not today. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and they both tensed. The kid took a step back, but he didn't run. I almost wished he would. It would have been easier that way. I could have watched him trip over himself, trying to escape, could have let him leave without another word. But he stayed. Melissa stayed. And that meant I wasn't done yet. I let my eyes settle on her, taking in every detail. The way her fingers twitched at her sides. The way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. The way her eyes, those same eyes I had trusted for years, were filled with something that looked a lot like fear. Good. She should be afraid. Tell me, I said, my voice even. How long? She swallowed hard, but I already knew the answer. Long enough. Long enough for her to lie to my face. Long enough for her to smile at me in the morning, kiss me goodbye, and then come back here and let him put his hands on her. Long enough for them to get comfortable. That's what burned the most. The comfort. The way I had walked in, and they hadn't even noticed me at first. They weren't rushing. They weren't hiding. This wasn't some stupid mistake. Some one-time lapse in judgment. This was a routine. Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it again. She couldn't answer. And that was my answer. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. My body felt tight, like every muscle was wound too hard, ready to snap. I wanted to break something, smash something, make them feel even a fraction of what was clawing its way through my chest. But I didn't. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Instead, I turned my attention to the boy, because that's what he was. Just a boy playing a game he didn't understand. I looked him up and down, taking in the way he stood, stiff, uncomfortable, like he was ready to bolt, but too afraid to make the first move. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. How old are you? He hesitated. My jaw tightened. Answer me. He cleared his throat, his voice weak. 20. Jesus. I ran a hand down my face, letting out a slow, humorless chuckle. Melissa was 38. 18 years. That was the gap between them. I didn't even know what to say to that. I had spent years thinking I knew the woman I married, and now she was standing in front of me, caught red-handed with some kid who probably still had homework to do. I looked back at her. You're pathetic. She flinched. That was good. That was real. She could make excuses, could twist words all she wanted, but she couldn't rewrite that. She had been caught, and now she had to live with it. She took another shaky breath, then tried again. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed. That's cute. I'm serious. She pushed, her voice desperate now. It just happened. I never planned it. I stared at her. You never planned it? She nodded quickly. Yes. It wasn't like that. I wasn't. I took another step toward her, watching her eyes widen. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice calm. You just tripped and landed on his lips? Her face twisted, her hands shaking now. I didn't let her finish. Or maybe he tripped first. I continued, my tone sharp. Maybe he was just sitting in your classroom, and one day his mouth accidentally fell on yours. She didn't answer, because there was no answer. There was no world where she could make this okay. The kid shifted on his feet, clearly wanted to say something, but I shot him a look, and he shut his mouth fast. Melissa was still trying, though, still hoping. You have to understand. No, I cut in. I don't have to understand. And I won't. She bit her lip, her hands dropping to her sides. Her whole body sagged slightly, like she was realizing, really realizing, what she had done, what she had lost. And I wasn't done yet. I stepped back, exhaling through my nose. You know, I murmured, shaking my head. I should thank you. Her brow furrowed. What? I met her gaze, holding it steady. For showing me exactly who you are. The words hit her hard. I could see it in the way her breath caught, the way her eyes flickered with something close to panic. Because she knew what came next. She knew this wasn't something we could come back from. This wasn't just a fight. This wasn't some stupid argument that we could smooth over. This was the end, and I was about to make damn sure she knew it. The kid made a small movement, shifting toward the door, clearly wanting out of this mess. I let him go. I wasn't going to stop him. He wasn't the one I was going to destroy. Melissa took a half step toward me, like she was about to reach out again, but I was already moving. I turned away, walking toward the door, grabbing my keys from the table. And then I looked back one last time. "You don't exist to me anymore," I said quietly. Her mouth parted slightly, but she didn't speak. Because there was nothing left to say, I walked out, shutting the door behind me. I didn't look back. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. The road stretched out in front of me, endless and empty, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The rage was still there, simmering just beneath my skin, a slow burn that refused to fade. My jaw was clenched so hard it hurt. Every time I blinked, I saw it again. Her fingers in his hair, their mouths pressed together, the easy way their bodies had fit like it was normal. Like I was the intruder in my own damn house. I pressed down on the gas. The engine roared beneath me, the speedometer creeping higher. The world outside blurred, streetlights streaking past like ghosts. I could have driven forever, could have let the miles swallow me whole. But eventually, reality started pressing in from all sides. I had nowhere to go. I wasn't going back home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I sure as hell wasn't about to call anyone. Not friends, not family. Not yet. I pulled into a parking lot, some nameless gas station on the edge of town, and turned off the engine. The silence hit me hard, pressing in on all sides, heavier than I expected. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space in front of me. Melissa was probably still standing in that living room, shell-shocked, maybe even crying. Maybe she thought I'd come back once I'd cooled off, that I'd listen, that I'd give her a chance to explain. She was out of her damn mind if she thought that was happening. I leaned back against the seat, exhaling slow. 20 years. 20 goddamn years. That's how long I had known her. That's how long I had built a life with her. And in the end, that life had been torn apart in an instant. It should have hurt more. I should have felt something other than anger. But the truth was, my brain wasn't even processing the loss yet. Maybe it never would. Because as far as I was concerned, Melissa had already been dead to me the moment I saw her with him. A movement in my peripheral caught my eye. A man was standing outside the gas station, lighting a cigarette, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow of the streetlights. For a brief, wild second, I imagined myself walking over, asking him for a smoke, even though I hadn't touched one in years. What the hell was wrong with me? I shook my head, running a hand down my face. I needed to think. I needed a plan. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Melissa had played her game, made her choices. And now it was my turn. And I wasn't about to let her walk away from this without consequences. I pulled out my phone, stared at the screen. No messages. No missed calls. She hadn't even tried to reach out yet. Maybe she was waiting, giving me space. Maybe she thought I'd come crawling back when I was ready to talk. She really didn't know me at all. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My thumb hovered over a familiar name. Then I pressed call. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, groggy and annoyed. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" I ignored that. I need a favor. A pause. Then a sigh. Jesus. What now? I took a breath. My pulse was steady. My voice was calm. I need to ruin someone's life. Silence. Then a low chuckle. Well, that's one way to start a conversation. I didn't laugh. I was dead serious. Melissa thought she could burn everything we had down to the ground. She had no idea I was about to do the same to her. The voice on the other end of the line sighed, long and slow, like they were debating whether they actually wanted to get involved. "All right," they finally said. "Who are we talking about?" I stared straight ahead, my fingers tightening around the phone. "Melissa." Silence. Then a low whistle. "No kidding. Do I sound like I'm kidding?" Another pause. "All right. I'm listening." I hadn't spoken to Caleb in years. Not properly, anyway. We had been close once, back when we were younger, before life got in the way. Before I got married. Before he got involved in, well, things. He had always been the one people called when they needed something done, something handled, something fixed. The kind of favors that didn't come without a cost. I never thought I'd be the one making the call. But here I was. I took a breath. I don't want this to be easy for her. You want messy? He asked. I want destruction. Caleb let out a low hum, like he was weighing his options. Okay, he said finally. Tell me everything. And I did. I told him about the kiss. About the kid. About the years I had spent building a life with a woman who had been so damn sure I would never find out. When I was done, Caleb let out a sharp laugh. Jesus, man. She really went for the student? Yeah. Damn. That's some midlife crisis bullshit. I didn't respond. I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. Caleb sighed. All right. You want her to lose something? You want her to suffer? We've got options. I closed my eyes. Tell me. Option 1. He started, his tone light, easy like we were discussing the weather. We go the public humiliation route. Make sure everyone knows exactly what she did. Get in front of the right people. Her work, her friends, her little academic world. My jaw clenched. I could already picture it. Her colleagues whispering behind her back, parents questioning whether she should be teaching their kids, students snickering behind her in lectures. It wasn't enough. Caleb seemed to sense it. All right, he said. Option 2. We hit her where it really hurts. Her job. You mentioned he's a student, right? That means ethics violations. Power imbalance. Could get her fired. That one made me pause. Melissa had spent her whole damn life building her career. She loved being a professor. Loved standing in front of a room full of kids who hung on her every word. And if that got taken away, she wouldn't just lose a paycheck. She'd lose everything. Caleb chuckled. I can already tell you're interested in that one. I didn't deny it, but I wasn't done yet. I want more, I said. Caleb whistled again. You're really out for blood, huh? I didn't answer. Because, yeah, I was. Melissa had spent years lying to me, looking me in the eye, kissing me goodbye in the morning, knowing damn well she was crawling into bed with someone else. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. Caleb exhaled. All right, let's ruin her. I drove home, slower this time. The fire inside me was still there, still burning, but now it had focus. A plan. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. I sat in the car for a long moment, staring at it. It didn't feel like home anymore. Not after what had happened inside those walls. I finally forced myself to get out, walking up to the front door. When I stepped inside, the silence was thick, heavy. No music, no lights, no sign of her. I took a slow breath and walked further in. And then I saw her. Melissa was sitting on the couch, curled in on herself, staring at the floor. She didn't look up when I entered. She must have been waiting for me. I shut the door behind me, taking my time. I didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge her right away. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of this moment, the inevitability of it. Finally, she lifted her head, eyes red-rimmed, face pale. You came back, she whispered. I stared at her. You sound surprised. She swallowed. I thought maybe you. She cut herself off, shaking her head. I didn't know if you'd ever come back. I let that hang in the air for a long moment. Then I shrugged. It's my house. She flinched. I walked past her, into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water. Took a slow sip. Melissa didn't move. She was waiting, probably hoping I'd sit down, that we'd talk, that I'd listen. I wasn't interested in talking. Not in the way she wanted. After a moment, she took a shaky breath. I know you hate me right now. I didn't correct her. She continued. But I never wanted to hurt you. That one made me laugh. A real, sharp, bitter laugh. She winced. I mean it. It was stupid. I made a mistake. I set my glass down on the counter, turning to face her fully. A mistake. She nodded quickly. Yes, that's all it was. A horrible, horrible mistake. I tilted my head. Which part? She blinked. What? I took a slow step toward her. Which part was the mistake? The lying? The sneaking around? The way you looked at him, like I didn't even exist. Her breath hitched. I leaned in slightly. Or was the mistake getting caught? Her face crumpled. That's not. I straightened, stepping back. Save it. Her hands curled into fists in her lap, frustration flashing across her face. We can fix this. I didn't even blink. Yes. Her voice wavered. We can. We've been through too much, There's no we, Melissa. She let out a sharp breath, looking away. You don't mean that. I did. I really did. But I wasn't going to say it. Not yet. Because I had plans now. And she wasn't going to see them coming. She inhaled slowly, then lifted her gaze back to mine. Do you still love me? I met her eyes, holding them steady. Then I smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a forgiving smile. Just a slow, careful, deliberate smile. Go to bed, Melissa. She hesitated. But, go to bed. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. And finally, she stood, her movements slow, uncertain. She took a few steps toward the hallway, then stopped. She turned to look at me one last time. I didn't say a word. After a moment, she nodded, more to herself than to me, and disappeared down the hall. I waited until I heard the bedroom door click shut. Then I reached for my phone, and I made my next move. Melissa thought this was about forgiveness. She had no idea what was coming next. I sat in the dark, the weight of the night pressing in around me, the glow of my phone screen casting sharp shadows on my face. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, then I typed the message. She took the bait. The reply came almost instantly. Good. Let's start the fire. A slow breath left my chest. I leaned back, letting my eyes flick to the closed bedroom door at the end of the hall. Melissa was in there, probably curled up under the blankets, maybe crying, maybe trying to figure out what to say in the morning, maybe even convincing herself she could fix this. She was wasting her time, because by the time she woke up, her world was going to look a whole lot different. I wasn't interested in conversations. I wasn't interested in closure. I was interested in destruction. Melissa thought she had gotten away with something, that she had controlled the story, that she could choose how this ended. But that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt the person on the receiving end. It unravels everything. It tears down foundations. And if I was going down with this house, I was making damn sure she burned with it. I tapped on Caleb's message, my mind racing. He was good at this. Too good. Caleb was the kind of guy who thrived in situations like these. He knew how to dig, how to expose, how to ruin. And the best part? He didn't care about collateral damage. I did, but not this time. I opened the attachment he sent. My stomach curled in satisfaction. Emails, messages, receipts, proof of Melissa's little mistake. I didn't need to wonder how he got them. I didn't need to ask. Caleb had his ways. And right now, I wasn't in the mood for morals. I scrolled through them, my jaw tightening. She hadn't just been careless. She had been stupid. The kid, let's call him what he was, a child playing pretend in a game meant for adults, had been sloppy. He had sent messages late at night, had poured his little lovesick heart into texts, had practically documented every pathetic moment of their affair. And Melissa? She had responded, encouraged it, fed into it. The woman who once told me she despised infidelity, that she would never forgive a cheater, had been sneaking around like a teenager with a crush. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Caleb's next message popped up. Ready for phase 2? I cracked my neck, fingers tightening around the phone. Do it. Copying the university board. Oh, and faculty HR. You want students involved too? I paused, my tongue running over my teeth. She loved that school. More than she loved me, clearly. It was her life, her identity. I wasn't just taking away her job. I was taking away who she was. She had already taken everything from me. Now I was going to take it from her. Everyone. Done. I exhaled slowly, watching as he forwarded the proof. It was out of my hands now. It was in the system. It wouldn't be long before the call started. Wouldn't be long before the whispers started. Wouldn't be long before Melissa stepped into a room and felt all those eyes on her, judgment crawling over her skin, the weight of her choices settling in. And the best part? She wouldn't even see it coming. I sat in the kitchen for another hour before I heard the bedroom door open. Soft footsteps padded down the hall. A hesitant pause. Then, finally, she stepped into the room. Her eyes were still puffy. Her hair was a mess. She had slept in the same clothes she wore last night. And for a second, she almost looked like the woman I used to love. Almost. She swallowed hard, wrapping her arms around herself. You didn't come to bed. I didn't answer. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her sleeves. Are we going to talk about this? I tilted my head. What's left to talk about? She let out a slow breath. I know you're angry. That made me laugh. A real, sharp, bitter laugh. She flinched. "Melissa," I said, dragging my fingers across the rim of my glass, my voice eerily calm. "I'm not angry." She blinked. "You're not." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locking onto hers. "No," I murmured. "I'm done." Her breath hitched. "Good." I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to know, in the deepest part of her, that she had lost me, that there was no path forward, no fixing this, no world where I would ever forgive her. And before she could open her mouth to argue, before she could spin whatever pathetic excuse she had been rehearsing all night, her phone buzzed. She frowned, reaching for it. "Who?" Then she went still. She stared at the screen. A muscle in her jaw twitched. Then another buzz. And another. Her hands shook as she scrolled, her lips parting, her breathing coming quicker. I watched her, taking a slow sip of my coffee, waiting. She swayed slightly, her eyes darting over the words, her fingers moving faster, desperate. And then, finally, she looked up. Shock. Disbelief. Fear. Good. That fear? That sinking, stomach-twisting realization? That was the exact moment she understood. She wasn't in control anymore. I was. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What did you do?" I set my cup down with a soft clink. Then I smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a forgiving smile. A slow, careful, deliberate smile. "The same thing you did, Melissa." I leaned back, stretching out my legs, enjoying the way her face paled. "I made a choice." She started to shake her head, panic creeping into her expression. "You know, you didn't." "I did." Another buzz. And another. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." I tilted my head. "Something wrong?" She sucked in a sharp breath, stumbling back slightly. I can fix this." "I can." I arched a brow. "Fix what?" Her lips trembled. She knew. There was no fixing this. Melissa had spent years lying, years believing she could do whatever she wanted, that she could break something and then decide when it was repaired. But some things couldn't be repaired. Some things had to burn. And now she was standing in the ashes of her choices, and there was no way back. No second chances. No escape. Just consequences. She opened her mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to scream. I didn't care. I picked up my phone, turned the screen toward her. The headline was already making its rounds. University professor under investigation for inappropriate relationship with student. Melissa's hands flew to her head, her breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. I took another slow sip of coffee, and I watched her world collapse. Melissa stood there, frozen. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, scrolling frantically, as if she could somehow undo it all, as if the words on the screen might change if she just stared at them long enough. But they wouldn't. They were permanent, just like what she did. Her breath came in short, panic bursts, her chest rising and falling too fast, like she was on the edge of a breakdown. I'd seen her stressed before. I'd seen her worried, even upset. But this was terror, and I wasn't going to stop it. I wasn't going to save her. Melissa had made her bed, and now she was sinking into it. I watched as she stumbled back, gripping the kitchen counter like she needed something, anything to hold on to. Her phone buzzed again, then again, then again. I knew exactly what was happening. The school had seen the reports. The board was talking. Her colleagues were whispering. The students, were already eating this alive. Because nothing stays quiet in a place like that. A professor sleeping with a student? It was the kind of scandal that never disappeared, the kind that stuck. Even if she somehow managed to talk her way out of getting fired, even if she convinced the board it wasn't technically illegal, it wouldn't matter. Her reputation was in flames. Melissa gasped, her phone slipping from her fingers, clattering onto the floor. She didn't pick it up. She turned to me instead, her face pale, her eyes wild. "What did you do?" she choked out. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. I held up a mirror. She blinked rapidly, her breaths uneven. "You?" She shook her head violently. "You set me up." I laughed. "No, Melissa, you did that. I just made sure everyone saw it." Her fingers dug into the edge of the counter, her knuckles going white. "You ruined my life." I arched a brow. "Like you ruined mine?" She flinched. I didn't mean to." I pushed off the counter, stepping closer. "Don't say it." Her lips trembled. But I don't say it. My voice was low, dangerous. Because if I heard her say one more time that she didn't mean to, that it was a mistake, I wasn't sure what I'd do. I had spent years believing in this woman. Years building a life with her. Years thinking we were a team. And all of it, had been a lie. She had looked me in the eye every single day, knowing what she was doing. She had kissed him, knowing what it would do to me if I ever found out. And she had the audacity to act like I was the villain here. Melissa took a shaky breath. We can fix this. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Fix what? Your career? Your reputation? I tilted my head. Because you're not talking about fixing us. There is no us anymore. She went rigid. And then, suddenly, she wasn't crying anymore. Something in her shifted. The panic faded, replaced by something colder, something calculating. She squared her shoulders, inhaling slow and deep. And when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but steady. If you think I'm going to let you take everything from me, she said, then you don't know me as well as you think. I held her gaze. Oh, I know exactly who you are. Her jaw tightened. Good. I wanted her to be angry. I wanted her to feel every damn thing I'd felt in that moment when I walked in and saw her with him. The betrayal, the disbelief, the rage. She had spent all these years thinking she was the smartest person in the room, that she could manipulate anyone into believing whatever version of reality she spun. Not this time. This time, she had lost. And I wanted her to feel every second of it. Melissa's breath hitched. You love me. I didn't even blink. I used to. Her face crumpled. She took a step toward me, her hands shaking. Please, she whispered. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But you don't have to destroy me. I tilted my head. Don't I? Her lips parted slightly, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But why was she surprised? Had she really thought she could betray me like this and just walk away? Had she really believed I would just take the hit and let her move on, let her live her life while I picked up the pieces of mine? No, she didn't get to walk away from this clean. Not after what she did. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it this time. Instead, she just stared at me, her entire body trembling. I love you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I let the silence stretch between us, thick and heavy. Then I leaned in slightly, just enough for her to hear me clearly. No, I said. You love control. She gasped softly, like I had just knocked the air out of her lungs. I stepped back, my heart pounding, my hands steady. Melissa had spent years thinking she had power over me, that I would always be there, that no matter what, I would always choose her. She was wrong. She had lost me. She had lost everything. I turned, heading for the front door. Melissa rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Wait. I yanked free, my voice like steel. Don't touch me. She took a step back, stunned. I pulled the door open, pausing for just a second. Then, without turning around, I spoke one last time. I hope he was worth it. And then I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't hear her sobs. I didn't care. Because as far as I was concerned, Melissa was nothing but a ghost now. And I was done living with the dead.